it's Rick, 28 millimeter RPG. What's going on? I subbed to these guys a long time ago. They used to be, I guess, the Brigade 2.0 or something like that. They were, they're about as close to role play as you are going to get with not being part of the 4D community. Okay, not to say that there's any. These guys have good role players in them, but they still have the game master doing the directing kind of thing where they kind of rewrite the players' turns, and they have more of a parlay between the invisible floaty head game master that follows you around, that you can rebound questions and answers in order to avoid any kind of calamities in front of you before actually trying to do something as a character. So you have that going on, which we don't allow in 4D. Okay, so you have those sorts of differences. I mean, their games are a lot faster than you would find from Matt Mercer or Matt Colville or all those horrible, dreadful, they're just awful game masters out there that people seem to be glorifying because it's their weekly doldrum entertainment that they listen to while vacuuming the floor. That's it's a bunch of entertainers put together, maybe making jokes about stuff, and you hardly ever get any part of the game going through. So these guys, at least, these guys that call themselves the Thieves Guild Games now, at least they've got players that will try to play their characters. Okay, and even though they don't hold some of the mannerisms that 4D does, there are things that maybe we can contribute to 4D to give them some guidance on maybe some of the particular things that we've encountered and we've overcome by certain things in our mannerisms that work in our games to correct any kind of problems that may occur. So let's see what they're talking about. Players only want one thing, and it's disgusting. See what this disgusting thing is.
All players want, and GMs just do not like to surrender. What is that thing, Rich?
Narrative control.
Oh God, it's gross. Yeah, man. So what?
Yes.
What should we define narrative control? Is that necessary in 2025's gaming?
Yeah, everything should be redefined.
That's a good question. We probably should, just so that we're all on the same page.
Okay.
But I'm going to argue though also that I don't think some players actually want that.
Yeah,
there are a lot of
want
players
that
when you give them the opportunity, they're like,
yeah,
I don't know.
You're not wrong.
So
you're not wrong.
Is that okay? Well, okay, we're going to tell you why that is, because we figured out why that is. We have been conditioned over the years, over many years. I'm sorry about the volume discretion between that's as high as that volume will go. So I've lowered my volume to be kind of a little lower. So you may have to go ahead and bring up the volume on this video in order to equate it. Otherwise, you'll hear me super loud and these guys super low if I didn't do this adjustment. And this is an adjustment, even though it may not sound like it. But okay, the reason why players have no idea what to do when they're given all this freedom is the same thing as if you've had somebody encaged all their life inside a cage with manacles on their arms and legs, and they've been held in this cage for all of this time, and then one day you say, okay, this is like 30 years later, you finally decide, you're going to let this thing go. This person caged up in this cage for 30 years. So you go ahead and open the door of the cage and you unshackle his shackles and you say, okay, young man, go out there and and live your life. Be free. And that shackled person is going to look out there and go, how am I going to feed myself? I've been getting this bowl of food every day, and you know, how do I, you know, I have the master here, the person that has protected me all this time in this cage, has provided me with everything. How do I survive out there? You know, it's like you'd be scared. You'd be like, you know, go back into your cage because it's the safest spot that you have ever known, right? That's the problem. Is all these players have been conditioned over all these years because 97% of the games that are out there are presented in such a way that you have to follow a preconceived path by the game master, and that's the way the players have been conditioned over and over again. They haven't ever been given a real agency ever. And you know, there's a reason why they would be kind of scared to use bennies, or you know, the high roll gets, you know, a narrative control like they do in Numenera Cipher system. These things happen. Players don't know what to do with them because they have been conditioned so much to realize, anything that I have, you know, tried in my early infant days of role playing, trying to get into role play and doing these things that I thought were my freedoms, and being told, no, you can't do that because I'm the GM and I'm the arbiter of the rules and how you breathe and talk and look in the world. That's my domain. You are here to be my human die roller. And that's how a lot of players feel, is that the game master is just, you know, having you as the human die roller that maybe jokes about the situation, or maybe implies that they're doing something, or implies a bunch of questions about what they can do, and then you know, proceeds with that. And that has been the problem. Problem is the players, all players have been conditioned this way. So we in 4D are trying to break that conditioning, and the conditioning of the game masters as well, because it's just as much their fault as it is the player's fault. You know, I would say I'll make some suggestions on how to make this a little bit more easier for you. So give some things that we learned from training on vetting players to get them out of this mindset. So this is what we do, okay? And I'll explain some of this. Let's carry on with this video.
Yeah, I've definitely played with those people. You know, we talked about last week with some of the hot takes, you know, forcing people to take narrative control is, I think, kind of what happens sometimes, you know, in some games. Especially if you got a game like Savage Worlds where it's like, or Fate, and it's like, spend your
Yeah,
chips.
I just watched that game.
Dictate something, and happens. Like, oh, we succeed? No, come on, man.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And, you know, I think for those that don't know, what we're talking about is, like, when we say narrative control, allowing the players a modicum of agency to help build the world or to build the scene. And I think you and I have talked about it a lot, where you say you're in a warehouse and a lot of players, well, is there a box I can hide behind? You're in a warehouse, dude. I didn't say it was an empty warehouse.
Right, yeah. Yes.
So there's a lot of is this available? Is that available? Whereas I think as a GM, if we can just give up some of that control and say, you know what, we're building this scene together, and it may not be in my head initially, but bring it in. And if there's a reason why that doesn't fit, I, as the GM, still am the adjudicator, right? I can still say, no, sorry, I should have painted that scene a little bit better. I apologize, but that thing is not there, or you can't do that for this reason, and I can expound upon it at that point. But if it's unimportant to what's going on, and it's important for the player because it gives them something that they can do, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's yeah, and there's so many conversations, you know, downright to arguments about stuff like that, of like, the easiest, simplest example that I've seen and I've used, and people will argue just vehemently against it, is you're, say it's 1930s, we're doing Call of Cthulhu or Deadlands Noir or whatever. You're in a bar, you're going back and forth with someone, and all hell breaks loose. You flip over the back of the bar, and the player taking narrative control is like, I reach for the shotgun. It's 1930. Odds are there's a shotgun behind the bar. There's a lot of GMs who are like, goddamn shotgun back there. I didn't plan for that. And be like, well, probably one, because you don't go to a lot of bars, and you may not. You really normally. I think it comes from you don't understand the setting that you've put together.
Yeah.
Kind of like you said is. But yeah, there's I have seen that a lot where people are like, you don't get to tell me there's a weapon back there. I was like, what? It's a bar, man.
Yeah. Well, not to mention that's a common trope in a lot of the movies and stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I mean they're talking. I mean they're talking sense in the case of in their circle. Yeah. A game master will still want to try to retain some sort of control. And especially in that shotgun situation, I mean, there's a lot of things that could be alleviated easily if you're keeping in context with the one action turn policy. Okay, every turn, every character in this group that you're playing with gets to do one action. Okay, they get to say where they move to, or they're anchoring to the situation. In this case, the character anchors himself to the bar. It says he flips over the bar and reaches over for where the shotgun is under the register. Okay, that would be an assumption. So now the game master, after other players have had their turn and everything, okay. Now the game master can say, okay, there is a blank shadowed or, a white area under, I'm trying to explain like a wood stain underneath the counter. There's like a blank spot where that shotgun used to be. Of course, the shotgun's in the hands of the bartender currently. So that can be a thing that has happened if you want the character not to have that imaginary shotgun. Some things aren't just cut and dry. Maybe that shotgun is underneath there now, and he grabs that shotgun. Is there's been many times where that shot from that shotgun goes and it's a dud shell, or you use it, boom, the double barrel shotgun goes off. Okay, it was in double barrel mode ready. Unless the character has specified that they click it into the single shot mode. If it's a double barrel shotgun, both barrels go off on one shot. Let the debris fly the way it may. It's only one shot from this shotgun. He'd have to go ahead and, reload it, duck away, reload it, and proceed to continue to use it if there's extra shells around. That is questionable. I mean, it gives you room to narrate further what else is underneath that the bartender's register. If you're keeping with the context of one action per round for each character, it should go very simply and smoothly, because you can inject as a game master any kind of differences in what's happening. You do have control over how much ammo is inside something that is found in that location. You can tell the player what that is. It can be implied by the player, but maybe the electronic reading on the ammo counter didn't register that the person pulled out the cartridge, the magazine out of the out of the weapon at one time and inadvertently lost a few of the shells. They just kind of flew out or something like that, or the magazine was banged, in process, and a couple of the shells came out, and so when they loaded back in, it was still reading, that he had 10 rounds in the magazine, but he actually only has 6 because 4 fell on the floor earlier in the day, and were lost to rampant feet being on the bar floor all day. Stuff like that. You have these abilities to intervene in subtle ways as a game master, always. But do you really want to? Do you really want to impede players' creativity when you've granted them these powers? Now, you're going to have to change the way that you play, of course, and in the way the conduct of the game master and the player goes, in order for this to be all successful. So that's one thing that we discovered with 4D, is you need to have these adjustments in your game that you wouldn't normally see in the run-of-the-mill 95%, 97% of the games out there. You have to do something a little different for this freedom to occur and to occur naturally. Of course, you only play with good players, vetted players. You have some really good players there. I don't think any of your players would go outside of really weird realms of believability in your game. They wouldn't do that. For example, if you're running a Alice in Wonderland game, you expect, rabbits running around in clothing and talking and crazy creatures, smoking weird things, weird psychedelics and stuff like that. And the world is going to be weird where, you eat a cookie, you grow, and, you eat a mushroom, you grow small, whatever it is, all these things, all these weird things are understandable in that weird situation. But if we get into a game of Blade Runner, you would expect, a more of a brooding story about AI. Is it really, are they people? Are they sentient? Are they not? Are they conscious? These questions arise in these kinds of games, and you play upon these themes, of hunter and hunted and stuff like that, and the humanity behind all of this. Is it right to be hunting down uh, uh, these artificial people and destroying their lives, or can you consider them lives? Does your player, does your character, even consider that as a possibility, that these are actual conscious, critters, do they serve a purpose which could be greater? These are all things that you bring up in these games, and when you have sci-fi kind of atmospheres, that you expect sci-fi weapons, some sense of reality, and a balance to the situation. At times that seems oddly dystopic, but there's an attempt to keep everything balanced. The poor are poor, the rich are rich. They've got their levels. Everything's sorted in an order in this, dystopia. You have to keep to the themes of what you're trying to present. And if you're bringing in, Alice in Wonderland stuff into your Blade Runner game, it's going to feel weird. And players don't strive to create this thing. They want to be involved in something that feels realistic, to the environment that's been pulled off here. So if we're playing a Alice in Wonderland kind of thing, all the players are expecting those Alice in Wonderland kinds of aspects to show up. So they'll bring in those Alice in Wonderland kind of things into the game as part of co-creation. If you're playing in Cyberpunk or Blade Runner, you're going to expect those themes as well, and your players are going to expect that as well too. So naturally, they shouldn't be pulling out a magic, Vorpal blade, unless that it is, you wouldn't be bringing in a magic Vorpal blade, but it would be something that is akin to an electronic gadget that would be a Vorpal blade, right? So you have to, discern certain things in games, and players will pick up on this. They don't want to have this Alice in Wonderland thing show up in their cyberpunk game. It doesn't make sense. So why would they? The players do have their ability to hold back on doing that sort of stuff. You want those types of players. So practice these things. Practice the allowance of co-creation. I have an example of like my last live play. Watch that. The last 4D on 4D Thursday. So that would be episode 3, I believe. That one has me talking about our practice session with me and Uriah. And you can see how our practice session goes. I'm gauging how well he does in first person, explaining how he says, I do this. And in certain instances, he did do a couple of mistakes where he took multiple actions in one round, which, I corrected him at the end, at the end of the session. And after watching this over again, I kind of let him know that this is one of the things that maybe he can work on, keeping that, the count of actions down to 1, because we've all accidentally done that, before in our games. All of us have, done it as a transgression, and we realize it's a problem that some players may do inadvertently. It's a case of trust in that case, because they want to get to the game master the idea of what they're doing is going to be a 3-step procedure. You don't have to tell him that, though. You just keep in your head that this is a 3-step procedure, what you're trying to do. And your actions each turn open up the game master's eyes to what you're doing, because it's one turn at a time. And stuff can happen. If you're thinking that you're going to run to the car, get in, turn it on, and then drive down the road, all in your one turn, that won't happen. You might get into the car and fumble for the keys, and might be able to get a key into the ignition as your action, if that's the case, right? Then it's time for the game master to say his what NPCs or other environmental factors are happening around you, and boom, you go to your second turn. Your second round is going to be okay. After turning the ignition, I hear the engine go, and then you proceed on, or the game master can intervene and say, after the initial burst of soon, and then guy throws it into the gear, the game master could say that, maybe the transmission slips or something, maybe the engine bogs down and and it stalls, something like that. You have those abilities to intervene in those times, so you do have that control. Whether or not you want to intervene that way, to dissuade a person from using an object in the game, that's your discretion. But it also brings up a bit of maybe a frustration with the players if they don't see it as a conceivable kind of thing, but we just filled up the tank. There should be no reason for it to stall out or be out of gas, or We just had it in the shop. There should be no slippage of the transmission when I'm trying to put it in gear. You know. But that, like I say, those are discretions that the game master brings in as well. I'm pretty free. Like I'm cool with players co-creating whatever they want, because I know that they're not going to go out of the weird and strange bounds that seem strange in that environment. Okay, I know that they're not going to do that. They don't want to play in that kind of environment. They don't want their friends to be playing that sort of thing, where they bring in weird and uh, wondrous stuff into a cyberpunk kind of, or let's say Blade Runner situation, because that seems to be more, contemporary to modern, firearms and stuff, instead of the fantastical stuff you might see in cyberpunk, or Alice in Wonderland, right? So everybody is, considers what they're playing in. They don't want to wreck the environment of that. They don't want to change the genre of it. They want to keep it at a, in context of the genre that they've decided to start with. And they don't want to change that. Okay? It stays cyberpunk, or it stays Blade Runner, or it stays Alice in Wonderland. And that's the way we play it through that session. Whatever weird and wonderful thing, or, most realistic, to date kind of environment, of modern, 2000s that you would put the environment into, the genre into. Yeah, it takes a bit of strategy. It takes a little bit of figuring out. But once you got it, you're going to be in the 4D realm, and taking advice from us in order to make your games a little bit better. Because we've gone through all this on this, the struggles between game masters and players and co-creation. We've encountered those, and we've figured out ways to make them work. And they do work. We example them in our gameplay. You can see it happening. You can see my game with Uriah, and I'll put a link to Uriah's to his video, because I decided I'm not going to go ahead and upload it onto this onto YouTube as my video. That's his video, and he can express how he felt that game session went and everything. He had a great time. I had a great time with it, and he learned a few things about himself, through the interaction on how this works, because it was essentially the first time he's ever worked with a actual 4D game master, instead of a somebody that is a 2D game master, and he'll struggle with trying to, do this co-creation with, because a 2D game master will not allow this kind of thing. Even a 3D game master will hold more creative energy than the players do, if they have any at all. 4D is where you start co-creating. 3D is getting all the basics of the conduct between player and game master, what the game master controls, what the player controls every time their action comes up. Those are important things, and things that never get discussed at the table. It's never discussed in any rule book, but it is a super important thing that people are totally missing here, is how you conduct the turn of your game between the player and the game masters. What is allowed? What is not allowed? Do you talk back and forth to the game master as a big invisible head? Is that what we're doing? No. In 4D, we disallow that. We disallow a lot of things that you may think are essential to the success of conveying information from the player to the game master. We just change the context in which you relay that information. If you're asking a question, if you want to ask the game master a question without asking the question, you do it with your action. You find out a way through your action to ask that question. And you do it by your action. Easy. But how do you do that? I need an example of that. Then, watch our videos. We have everybody works that way. That's the way we're thinking. It's a totally different way of thinking in role-playing games. We're no longer thinking about maps and minis and thinking of looking at your character as a third person on the board, as this miniature standing up, having a good little time on the squares, going through the hallways of whatever it is that the scenario entails. We go through the eyes of the character. It's a totally different thing. As some things that you guys in the Thieves Guild games is touching in, but there are some things that kind of complete the circle which are being missed out, and it's not. I'm not saying, boo on you or whatever. It's just a lot of these things you don't realize. I played exactly the way you guys do, and back 2 years ago, I was doing all these crazy things that I call mistakes now, and I was no more the wiser until I started reflecting, like watching back on my videos and seeing where I can pull back on my control issues. And until you decide that you have control issues, you come to that conclusion you have control issues, or realize that you are having control issues, and never actually, you're going to be fighting against that. You're going to be fighting tooth and nail, and that's the reason why a lot of, this is a thing of contention with a lot of players and game masters out there. Do you allow this? And I was against doing this. I was against, allowing the players to, be co-creative. I am no longer of that mindset anymore. We've done so many games where this has been successful and enriching, and it adds to the game in so many ways, wonderful ways, that it becomes exciting for the game master to expect the unexpected himself. Okay? Because, I'm not knowing what exactly is going to happen. I don't come in with a perceived story in my games at all. I have, if there's anything perceived, it would be my motives of my NPCs. So they have motives, goals, their own little plot devices that they're figuring out. They want to do certain things in the world. They have their goals, and the player characters may encounter these through the process of what they're doing in the game. And it is not my say to say what the players are doing in the game as a game master. That's the player agency. They can be doing whatever it is they're doing in whatever location that they're doing at, from the opening scene, and wherever it is that they have started is where I'm going to employ the action, be it wherever it is that they start. Often I don't know where they're going to start. I may have a general idea. Okay, they're going to be starting in a town, but I won't know if they're starting from their bedroom, or maybe they're in the tavern. Maybe they're doing something downtown. They're doing some shopping. Not all the characters start in one spot. Your characters can start in different areas. Very easy to do. Everybody gets their turn. Just go around this and find out what's happening. If there's conversations going on between NPCs and players, give it a little bit back and forth a couple of times before you go to the next player. But don't go overboard and that sort of, respect everybody's playtime. Make it very even. If you're spending a little bit more time with one, then give a little bit more time with the next one if he wants it, and then same with the next player, or just keep on going around. Then hold back. Next the um, player starting in the initiative order, he decides to do something really quick. Next player does something really quick, or it might take a little bit longer, but all in all, it'd be quick, one action things. Explain where you are as well each time. Bring that up in your anchoring. That really helps, because then you no longer sound like a floating head. As a character, you are actually beside something. You're on a chair, sitting on a chair. You're standing by a chair. You are leaning against a wall. You are leaning against a pillar. With the front, in the back, with your arms folded. And toe tapping on the floor or whatever. You describe your current, in what you are doing. And you may say a quirk of whatever it is your character is saying in character to another character, to another player characters, or to an NPC. But you emote all this stuff in first person. I do this, and I say, hey John, any chance you got a few spare bolts on you? I'm running a little low from last adventure. And then they carry on conversation back and forth with a NPC or whoever John is, and maybe he's a player character. You carry that on. You start rotating around. You're creating an environment. You're explicitly saying where you are. Everybody knows where they are. This is something that I find lacks in Thieves Guild games is anchoring. Some of them do it pretty good, but some of them don't even realize what it is that they're doing. This anchoring, providing information on where their character is through their action. It's stuff that we do naturally in 4D gaming that guys like these haven't considered yet. But they will eventually. Eventually, they'll see stuff, and give it time. People will start seeing how we do things and asking more questions on how to do it. Our our community has grown so much in the last year and a half. To have as many players as we have available now at our beck and call has never been so more open as it has been ever before. I'm sure that there was an occasional game, in Shauner's day in the brigade. They've had these, 4D role-play sessions, though probably a little, rough and less refined from what we have kind of like. We've basically taken this and refined how you do things in the game and kind of set them in stone so that people can kind of follow it as a rule set of conduct between players and game masters. And if you follow these, your game will go super fast. You'll have lots of co-creative abilities, and the game master has a way, if he feels that it does kind of it does feel like the player is pulling off a win condition by creating something, like a thing of C4 or something like that in a particular situation. Suddenly C4 is available. Well, there could be, once again, dud triggering mechanisms or something like that. If you really feel that is pulling, if you feel that the players are trying to create a win situation. But the thing is, we've got a vetting system so that doesn't really happen. We already know our players are not going to do that. They're not going to bring in that win. Sometimes they bring in something that seems really insignificant, and they feel guilty because they thought that maybe they were implying some sort of a potential win situation with their co-creation. And a lot of times we just no, yeah, that's fine. That sounded natural to have X appear, here, or a shotgun appear underneath the table. It's fine with us as 4D game masters. So let's see if they say anything else here.
Especially for that era. Now,
Yeah.
if it was 2025, there may not be a shotgun under that bar.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
still, if it's in line with the setting,
Yeah.
let it happen.
Yeah, you're probably going to have a bat behind there, one of those little mini bats, like a tire thumper.
Yeah.
Like truckers. That's the thing too. Is if the player does that in the 30 setting, like I grab a shotgun, it's an easy way to take back the narration without saying no and being a spoil sport of like you reach in, you grab you feel the wood of the stock, and you pull back and you stand up with all the cocksure arrogance of someone who's now got a double barrel, only to look down and realize you're holding a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's a super easy way of doing it.
And that becomes a really cool scene as well.
No, you don't do that. You don't do that. You don't suddenly change something in somebody's hands because you feel it's like a potential win situation. I would say that's just you're gonna have to check your I would say, yeah, you are having control issues if you feel that is what you should do, is change the staff into a snake for the player. It's change the shotgun into a baseball bat in mid arrangement. It'd be easier to go ahead and put dud shotgun shells in there. Maybe he bought them from a cheap vendor of recycling shotgun shells, and he's got a couple of duds. Maybe there's one dud. Maybe only one will go off. The other one, fizzes. Maybe the thing is just for show. Maybe the bartender has it purposefully unloaded and just for show. He doesn't want to kill anybody, but he wants to show that he's able to defend himself as kind of a ruse. And if the bobbies come in and check his place and see that he has a shotgun underneath, he would be probably avoiding a fine by having it unloaded, right? As far as a loaded weapon, he may be charged with something, right? It depends on what laws are around in that era and time and stuff. There are ways that we can do this if you stay in a one action per round, per turn, per player. You can intervene as a game master many different ways by changing the variables of the unseen or the yet unexplored, the condition of the shells. Maybe the gun will fall apart in one shot. It is an old ancient relic. You could describe it as that. The cracks in the barrel. In the metal of the barrel, that sort of thing. You can further describe and further certain things. It's a lot better than saying, no, you have this instead. Because that's kind of jarring and strange. Let me know what you guys think in there. I mean, I've gone on about 45 minutes here. Let me know what you think about this kind of thing. Co-creation. It's a thing we do in 4D. It's possible if your game master allows it in 3D. I mean, it is giving a little bit of 4D. Every game master will have these different degrees of what you can co-create, be it subtle or strong. Iron those out in your session 0. Session 0 is very important for that kind of thing. Keep your turns, one action at a time. It gives you a lot of leeway as a game master. You can only get so much done in one motion, one action. And then you have to go to the game master to see what's happening with everything else, right? You know, game master has lots of opportunity to go ahead and describe things maybe a little bit more critically. You realize that shotgun is an ancient, archaic piece of crap from the earliest versions of this shotgun. The old prototype or something. Who knows? Maybe it's something he found in a gutter one day. It's not even worthy of shooting anymore. It's rust encrusted. There's something fouling up the trigger mechanism. There's a lot of unknown things that you can bring into that thing if you really want it. I wouldn't do it. I would just make the shotgun, sure. There's going to be one double barrel shot, or, if it's single barrel, boom, one shot. You decide whether or not it's got a magazine or if it's, single shot. You bring in those variables by describing it further as a game master. Bring in something, describe it a little bit more so you get the details on it, Easy. You have that ability, they get what they want, maybe it's limited. Maybe they get what they want and you let it happen. It might be fun to have a shotgun going off in the bar and all the chaos is ensuing. See what happens. Maybe this brings about, the cops involved because now they're hearing shotguns from outside from the premise, and somebody called the coppers now, and now you have police on the way. It involves more things are happening, more pressure is coming onto the players. Bring it on, you use that. You have to think multidimensionally in your brain as a game master. You have to start thinking in fractals of possibilities. This may take some time to develop. Not all game masters can do this. It takes some time, and it's something that I'm writing a book on, and trying to give some insight for new game masters. Even if they're totally brand new into the hobby, is something to share with them, that they can start doing this 4D role play instead of starting as a 1D 2D player in the initial part of their career, which tends to be the thing that most players do when they first initially get into role-playing games. They sit back, they become just the human die roller, observing how players are playing, and then they will start partaking like the players do, as exampled. It's a lot easier if he enters in a 4D role-playing group and starts from 4D. Although he'll probably never be able to play in a game unless it's a 4D game, because you'll start playing 2D or 1D with these other guys, and you're still 4D, and it's a hard thing to do. You can't have 4D players in a 2D game master's game. It won't work. The game master will be all, wondering why these players are conjuring up these things that he's never described in his vicinities, and why they are not asking him questions about anything, why they're indicating in their actions, certain things that he has to bring up. He has to look at where these questions are coming from. They're coming from the actions now, not as a direct ask by the player. These things. And the reason why we do that is to keep everything in context of the first person eye set of the players. You want to have what the players are conjuring up in their head as the de facto. It doesn't matter to me in my game master mind where the warehouse, where the crates are, where whatever it is that they're imagining. They could be imagining, possibly stairs on either end. The scaffold stairs, kind of, well, not scaffold, but the catwalks and stuff like that. Maybe there's that around up in the ceiling areas and stuff. So there's access ladders or stairwells going to these things to reach upper levels of this warehouse, and there's stuff like that that may or may not be there. If the players conjure it up as a thing, cool. Now that's where some bad guys could be as well. They could be up in the rafters, and that something that you could evoke yourself. Use the things that the players bring in too. There's you're the game master. You're the environment. You are the environment. You are the people that show up in the scenario, and you bring in the pushes and all that. You embody the characters that are the NPCs. That's all you should be worried about. You shouldn't be worried about character end stuff. Characters will do their own things. Don't worry about moving them. Don't worry about restating stuff about what they did. Don't do that. Stop that. Like, it's a whole change. It's a whole mindset change that 3D and 4D bring in to the hobby. That is bringing in matters that allow players even playing time with each other. And the game master has freedom to sit back and write down some few notes as the players are yakking back and forth to each other. You're writing down your little push ideas and stuff. You have a lot of time to go ahead and make your ideas come into fruition as a game master with that time. It's easy to, you may not think it is right now, but until you try it and example it, maybe get some advice from us on how to do it, it becomes easier and easier to do. Soon enough, you can just walk into a game store, sit yourself down and say, okay, let's play something, and play it out automatically off the fly, and people be like, how do you do this? Well, because I'm 4D, there you go. So take with that what you will. We are ending here at about the 53-minute mark. Have an awesome day. You put in your insight on what different things you've encountered with trying to pull off co-creation, in an environment where the game master is a little bit hesitant on doing this, or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe you were the game master that allowed all this co-creation, and your players were like, "What do we do with this?" Talk in the comment section. Let me hear your insights and story. Anyways, have a good day. Hope rest of the day for you goes awesomely. I'm sure it will go awesome for myself. Take care.